Welcome to Not Alone Leaders in Conversation, a bi-monthly podcast where we delve into the minds and experiences of academic leaders who are shaping the future of higher education. Your host is Rafael Bras, professor at Georgia Institute of Technology and editor of Elsevier's Not Alone newsletter. In each episode, he will explore the complex challenges, decisions, and opportunities facing academic institutions today. Some of the topics you can look forward to in part 2 of this special episode are the public good and university research, the role of arts and education, understanding impact in higher education, affordability and accessibility in higher education, adapting to accelerated change, challenges with traditional metrics, and institutional mission versus rankings.
Next, I had a fascinating conversation with Deanna Totten-Beard, Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs at Baylor University. Well, one of the themes that we've been hearing about a lot is the relationship between academia and the private sector.
I was thinking about that this morning during the keynote here at the conference when Dr. Colleen was talking about hope and about the university and about private industry and university research and some of those wonderful programs he was describing. A scene popped into my head that I had just read this morning from the Michael Crichton novel Jurassic Park. I'm rereading it because of the new movie coming out, and I like hard science fiction. So I'm rereading the original novel. And there's a scene where John Hammond, who's the architect of Jurassic Park, is recruiting the researcher Henry Wu, who he wants to bring on to help develop all of the genome work. And he tells Henry Wu, don't go into academia. That's a dead end. He says, you've got to come here to private industry because none of the innovations that have mattered in the last 50 years have come out of academia, they've come out of private industry. And Henry Wu changes his plans for his career and goes with John Hammond. And it's a persuasive moment. I mean, Henry Wu goes, but the thing is, John Hammond is not the good guy in this novel. John Hammond is the architect of a really poorly conceived project that's going to kill people. And what he does is recruit Henry Wu to use all of his gifts to enrich a few people at the expense of many people and to cause harm instead of to benefit the greater good. And so it's this cautionary tale, and this is a very popular public piece, this cultural phenomenon, Jurassic Park. And it struck me when Tim Colleen said, we have to tell our story better. I thought, our story is right there. It's in the movies right now. It's a summer blockbuster. Our story includes the idea that our research minds and our great thinkers using their gifts for the public good, which means in my estimation, the university, is inherently better than them abandoning the university and exclusively using their gifts to drive private projects. That this is not good. This is not a good outcome. And the monster movie tells us that the bad guys abandoned their ideals. They forgot their humanity. And the university is a place where we remember our humanity, right? I mean, we have these schools of engineering and nursing and health, and they're right next to the School of Arts, and they're next to the School of Music. And yes, they have different roles to play, but the university says they're all here. So we make it harder to forget your humanity at a university. And other parts of our culture make it easy to forget our humanity. And I think that's one of the things that we are contributing to the greater good. And I heard that a lot in what he was saying this morning.
Yeah, that's a good point, but you cannot extrapolate that all the private sector fails that way, right?
No.
So
Absolutely.
it's not like the movie in many ways, but But you're
It's a
correct.
parable. It's a parable.
But you're correct in saying that it is part of our purpose to integrate all aspects of society and humanity, right? So what do you do to imbue those values on your faculty? What do you actively do to make sure that they do not forget that there have to be a set of North Stars and values we live by?
Right. We talk a lot at Baylor University about human flourishing. That's one of our key phrases, that our goal is human flourishing, which is a complex idea of people all over the globe living well, having enough, having their needs met, pursuing joy, being free to select their path of happiness, and using that as a North Star, I think allows us to have broader conversations about research, about teaching. I like to say to faculty, prospective faculty, when I'm interviewing them, that we want to prepare our students to solve problems, to leave and to solve problems. We want our faculty to help solve problems, of course. But we want to prepare our students to leave Baylor and solve problems, including problems that we don't even know about yet, right? And that's key to human flourishing as well, preparing people to be enabled and skilled and agile enough to step into situations of inequity or a challenge and to be part of the solution. And I think faculty are inspired by the idea that they are personally part of solutions and that they're preparing students to be part of solutions, because day in and day out, we are confronted with problems. We are hearing about problems, and to say your role is a problem solver, you're helping with problems and you're preparing students to help with problems, I think is a potent message. I think it's an antidote to despair.
Part of what you're addressing has to do with the concept of, are we able to discern what is true or not? There's and we heard it this morning also, there's a concern that there are alternate facts, right? What can we do to make sure that we can all at least agree on what are facts?
That is the question of the day, right? I thought we didn't have to discuss this anymore, right? I thought that I wouldn't have thought that that this would be such an urgent need, but it is. You're completely right. I think we confront this in part by helping prepare our students through the way we teach them, not only what we teach them, but the way we teach them to be discerning about not only information that comes to them, but the tools that render that information, and to think about information and tools critically and ethically, so that if they can sift out what is being sold to them for the benefit of somebody else and what has repetition and facts behind it to substantiate it. That's a long project, though. You don't do that in saying, here's our one course that is critical thinking, and now we've done it. It's a long project. It's a lifelong project. We have to be partnering with our K through 12 education system, which means not forgetting our wonderful schools of education and departments of education at our universities who are preparing teachers who are doing that work before the students show up, and then giving our students experiences in the content and the way we teach them and the tools that they use that help them to think about facts and truth in nuanced ways, in deep ways. It's not a short project, it's a long project. our students also being able to look at their faculty and seeing them model this is key. That's part of what we do as faculty, is we model seeking truth, boldly declaring truth, announcing our findings and standing by them, and then changing our conclusions when new findings come, and not being intractable, and teaching them that this is the way that knowledge is developed. They have to see it, and they have to see it multiple times over a long period of time. It's not an easy fix.
It is not. And you said something that triggered a thought in my mind. The concept of truth and the facts are not absolutes. They change. They change as society evolves, as we learn more, even in science, right? What was true 150 years ago in science is not true today in some parts of science. And it reminds me of a talk I heard once from Václav Havel, and he was amazing, a former first president of the then Czechoslovakia.
And a playwright.
And a playwright, yes. It was fantastic. And he gave a talk, and one of the lines, if I recall, it's not an exact quote, but he was addressing the idea that objectivism is a myth. Now, with that background, that's not what society wants to hear. That's not what people want to hear. That's not what politicians want to hear. They want an answer. They don't want uncertainty, which was another thing brought up today. How do we get that through?
You're talking about nuance. And, forgive me, my background is in the arts, and I'll say that the arts help us with nuance. I think that the arts, as partners with all other areas of human activity and knowledge, help people develop nuance and flexibility in responding to life experience. The fact that you can sit together with a group of people and read a poem and all agree that it's speaking to you, but when you talk about what it's saying, you express it in different ways and all of them are right, is something that you learn well in a literature class. Handing people artistic tools and setting them free to learn how to use them, and then realizing all the possibilities of those tools, is something you learn in an art class that is applicable to other areas of human activity. I'm thinking right now about a scientific lab that's here in Chicago, a Fermi lab, a physics lab. And I visited it once with a physicist friend of mine. And one of the things that struck me most about Fermi lab is that they have an artist in residence at Fermi lab, and they have an art gallery at Fermi lab. Because as they investigate the intricacies of the universe, and as they investigate particle physics, they also want to have lectures about art, and they want to walk through their space and see art, and they want to be in community with an artist, because that's a truth, and they have a truth, facts as well, that they're both exploring through different routes, and these are not mutually exclusive. And the presence of art helps validate their own interaction with nuance and change. Just as the scientific exploration encourages the artist. So my answer would be, again, the multipurpose university helps with this, because by putting our students in a place where they're encountering philosophy and art and music and engineering and biology all together in their experience through a time, and having them educated by faculty who are in relationship with people who do other areas of study, I think we're teaching nuance. And that's another answer to intractability.
I couldn't agree more. I'm a scientist, but I'm a firm believer on the power of the arts. And when you think of it, it's the ultimate creative activity. And that's what we want to be, right? We want to be creative. We want to be innovator. Well, Deanne, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Great to talk to you.
I suspect we could go forever.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. On the second day of this 2-day conference in Chicago, I caught up with Jordan Techmeyer from Princeton University. He is the Senior Associate Dean for Finance and Administration at the Office of the Dean of Faculty. The word impact, how do you take that? What do you get out of it? How do you measure it?
Yeah, I think that's the constant struggle, right? In terms of what we do, how do we measure it in a way that makes sense to people in multiple audiences, right? So how do we show, I think to the talk we heard yesterday and to the conference overall, how do we sort of show everyday people the impact that higher education can have, right, in a more broad context? And so, how can our research make an impact? How does sending your kid to college make an impact in their life? How does it make an impact in everyday life? I think that's sort of the center of what we're experiencing in higher ed right now, right? Not having done a good job for the last 20 or 30 years of demonstrating impact in a powerful way. So I think we as an industry need to do a much better job of articulating our impact. I think Tim in his speech yesterday made multiple instances of the things that University of Illinois system has made an impact on, how they've sort of made an impact on both Illinois itself, but also the country. And I'm a UIC alum, and I did not even know some of the things that my own institutions had done, my institution had done. So I think we just inherently do not do a good job of that, at least haven't recently. And so I think that's sort of something that we need to do a much better job of, especially in the current environment.
Now, I think he articulated very well how universities, and certainly the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, has had an impact in society. A lot of the things we do today are due to research done in universities. Yet the people in the street have clearly lost some faith in us, with approval rates, but you have to be caveated, depends how you ask the question, going down to 30%. What can we do to stop that? What do you think is the cause of that? Is there any way to regain that trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be sort of a multi-year, multi-pronged approach to sort of better help the public understand sort of the downstream impacts of what we do. Because I think historically what we've done is we're really good at telling each other what we've done, and we're really good at telling journals what we've done, but the average person is not reading the journals that we publish in, right? And so how do we translate sort of what we do? Like, I'll just use the Tesla example that he gave yesterday. Like, I don't think anyone out on the street would realize that Tesla is associated with the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in any way. So I think better storytelling around sort of the research we do, the work we do on campus, and how that has downstream impacts to the everyday person and how that impacts them in their life. I think really doing that. I think we saw a little bit of that with COVID and Penn in the vaccine development that they had done, previously. But I still think if you ask the average person, did universities have a positive impact on vaccine development? I don't think they would tell you they did. And I think it's just because we just don't do a good job of articulating that in the way that we should to the general public.
Some of that lack of trust, it has been argued, is due to issues of accessibility and affordability. That the average person, when looking at the cost of going to college, of sending their kids to college, gets overwhelmed, thinking that they cannot possibly afford that. And there's some truth to that. There's a significant truth to that. Although most colleges, certainly the privates, and Princeton is one of them, are quite generous in providing for those that cannot afford it. How can we turn that conversation around? How can we let people know that they should not self-censor, that they should not keep themselves away because the opportunity is there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. I think one is sort of helping. I've just went through this with one of my friends who have kids that are going away to college, just helping or going through the college exploratory period, just helping them sort of understand there's the sticker price of college, and then there's the price you actually pay. And everyone is so hyper fixated on, this school costs $50,000, $100,000. Not necessarily that the average person going to that school pays specifically less than that, or a lot less than that. And so I think sort of helping tell that story that just like when you buy a car, you never pay sticker price for a car, right? It's the same sort of thing in higher ed. You never pay sticker price for the institution in which you go. There's always some sort of aid that you can get along the way. So I think better articulating that there are opportunities to sort of drive down the price. I think we also, as an industry, have to do a better job to say we realize in the moment with everything going on that we can do a better job of controlling costs on our end, right? And we can drive down our price, and we can sort of see that in. I think Tim had mentioned that in his speech yesterday about how University of Illinois has seen their sort of reputation increase because he's been able to keep price down for the last 10 years, right? Keep that growth down. So I think having more examples of things like that, I think just also re-articulating sort of, because there's a lot of discussion around the value of higher education. Is it worth spending the money you do spend, whatever that amount is? And do you get that money back over time? And I think are sort of doing a better job of articulating the long-term benefits of a college degree and what that means and what you get out of that for the life. And then I also think just that last piece of reestablishing that higher education is a public good and that it brings benefits beyond the individual. I think we're so fixated on, well, you make X amount more if you get a college degree than you do if you just have a high school degree. We're so fixated on that salary number or that earnings number that we sort of overlook all the other benefits that come from an individual that gets a college degree. I think refocusing the conversation on all the benefits that society gets, I think would help that a little bit.
Let me suggest as a possibility, the big money, unquestionably, is in the tuition money, one way or another. Whether it's generated because of high tuition, which we do not want, or is generated by numbers. So do you see increased shifting to, well, let's say, increases in productivity in delivering the education side of the house, the content, let's say by online systems and technology with AI these days? You would imagine that will accelerate. And it's been proven that it can be done. We've done that at Georgia Tech and quite successfully with very high quality programs. Is there a way where you see people increasing population of students, which is possible for some schools, not all?
Yeah, I was going to say, depends on where you are.
Depends on where you are.
Yeah.
And simply increasing productivity by changing the method, or at least for a segment of that population, on the delivery.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's very location and institution specific. I mean, I think the PASHE schools in Pennsylvania they've started to consolidate down, right? So they've combined 6 institutions into 2. They still have their own campuses, but they've been doing some sort of class sharing, I guess is the best way to describe it. I think they now have a proposal on the table to say if you're at one PASHE school and you want to take a class that's not offered at your institution, you can take it at another institution via a different delivery method, whether that's online or asynchronous or whatever. So I think schools are beginning to think about that sort of model of like, how do we sort of leverage, especially system schools, how do we leverage sort of all of our campuses together to drive down costs in a way that allows us to enroll people at whatever campus they want to go to, but leverage all the expertise in people in other campuses. So I think that their way of sort of driving down or keeping costs low without adding programs, the same program at every school, but then deliver it to all those students in the same way. So I think that's a potential model going forward. Again, but that's very specific to sort of system schools who have multiple campuses who can do those sort of things. So again, I think that's one potential avenue there to sort of get the numbers higher for each classroom. So then you got more paying students in each classroom, right? To drive the.
So I've always argued, and maybe we can sort of have with this last question or a few questions, that we are living at a time of accelerated change. And that accelerated change I've never seen anything before. And it's not only what's going on right now in terms of the compact between government and higher education, which clearly is broken. The old compact is broken. A new compact has to be built. But it's also the rate of change in knowledge. When you think of what has happened in just the last 5 years, for example, mRNA vaccines overnight, quite successfully. Over that period, we observed for the first time a black hole. Literally saw it. We measured gravity waves. Those are fundamental gains in knowledge, which are game changers of enormous proportions. AI goes without saying. What is today is going to be different tomorrow. It's moving that fast. How do we keep up? How do institutions keep up? The rate of change is so fast and is compounded by that discussion about the compact with government now in the US that I'm afraid we don't have time to rethink our structure to be able to keep up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a sort of a pause button to sort of say, hey, this is going to be the new environment. Let me think about how we might structure things differently now. Like to your point, I think it's accelerating so fast that as soon as you make that decision, it's different than what it was, but your assumptions were, 5 minutes ago. But I think one can argue that we've had instances like this before. I think you look post-World War II in higher education, the amount of change that happened at institutions pretty substantially in that moment in time is probably pretty, I think the rate of knowledge on a broader scale was probably more there because we got more people through school than ever had been through school before, right? In a way, so we were educating more of the people. So I think knowledge on a broader scale was, but to your point, some of the specialties and some of the sort of bigger instances of like knowledge transfer, AI, some of the
rate of discovery,
it's just,
technology development is never seen like before.
Yeah, it's astronomical. I'm not sure how we keep up in this environment. I think we just keep doing what we've been doing, which is sort of doing the research that sort of sets us up to better understand those things, train the next generation of folks that are going to have to use that technology, or at least come away with the skills that will allow them to adapt in an environment that changes that rapidly, right? How do we equip our students to do that, our faculty to do that, our staff to do that? I think that would be sort of number one. But I think going back to our earlier part of our discussion around sort of better articulating to, especially our country, how we can be players in that, how we can help society be ready for those changes, how we're helping make those discoveries and then helping inform how society can benefit from those. Because I think, again, if you ask folks, I think they're going to think AI came from Google or some other company when really the underlying technology, came from colleges. So I think, how do you sort of articulate how our role in those discoveries and then how they better society? Because I think if you ask the average person, like, AI isn't going to, what does AI mean to me? That means I can shop online a little bit better. I think better articulating how it can impact life.
Well, that's an interesting point, and this is I'm going to get into it because I cannot avoid it. The example of AI is different than in most cases, in my opinion. AI is not new, obviously. For all my adult career, I've been listening about the potential of AI, and it never came to pass. It never came to pass, even with billions of dollars of investments all over the world, certainly in the US. The breakthroughs in AI that led to the building of, let's say, the release of ChatGPT in November 2022, if I recall correctly, were not from colleges. They are from companies. The breakthrough paper that made that possible in terms of interpreting large language models was largely out of private companies also. So we are in a situation where technology companies, large technology companies, are so large, and have so many resources that they overwhelm not only higher education, they overwhelm the government in many ways. So is that who does the discovery in AI in my mind, is more shared between private companies and academia than it has ever been in the past. It's strikingly so.
Yeah, I would say though, we still have and higher ed in general still has a role to play in that, right? So I think we can still figure out new and exciting ways to sort of leverage that technology in ways that private companies would not, right? They're profit-driven entities. They're pouring this money there because they see potential profit down in the future, right? We don't necessarily do our research and discovery in that way, right? We're doing it for the sake of research and discovery, right? We want to solve a problem in a way that companies will not. So I think it still goes back to sort of us articulating our role in that space and how we can either contribute in the near term. I'm going to imagine a space that there may have been a paper that was largely driven from private, but I'm going to guess if you went through their reference page, I'm sure they're citing a lot of academic.
Sure, that's absolutely true.
And so we're still driving it. And so, and I'm sure there were a lot of academics in those environments that went to Google during their sabbatical, right, to do some work, or went to ChatGPT to drive that work. So we're still in the game, right? We're still playing a role. I just think as we talked about earlier, I don't think we're clearly articulating to the public in general our role in these discoveries, our role in this change, and how we can help sort of guide society, people in sort of understanding the role it can play in their lives, right? And how it can make their lives better. Just because you see these big things and sometimes you get hyperfixated on the announcement point, right? It came from ChatGPT. Oh, they discovered this. There's a whole probably decades of research behind that, right? That probably came from an institution in some way, shape, or form that then sort of informed that to then got pushed over the top by them. So I think just sort of better articulating those stories of progress that we had a role to play in sort of those big changes.
Well, you've told a great story, Jordan. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
The Not Alone podcast is a collaboration between Elsevier and Professor Raphael Brass. We bring unfiltered perspectives on global issues by research and academic leaders. Experts from MIT, Harvard, UCLA, and beyond bring their conviction and compassion to a wide range of topics. Follow our channel for fresh content. And now, back to the show.
We're going to the University of Kentucky next and welcome Baron G. Wolf, the Assistant Vice President for Research and Chief of Staff. Your expertise is in data analysis to a large extent, and this day and age, that's incredibly important because we need to be effective in what we do. So it's a question of what you measure and how you measure it. How do you move forward in this world of changing expectations? How do your metrics change?
Yeah, so with the changing accountability and changing times, there's often more reliance on measurement. But oftentimes we automatically go to the numbers and the metrics in quantitative measures that already exist. But oftentimes those measures are traditional, they've been around for a long time, but they might have inherent bias or limitations, or they might be proxies for things that we think equal excellence, but they don't actually measure the things that you think they're measuring. So as we think as a global community and this change within higher education and accountability, looking for things that are a little more qualitative or looking at things that we actually value. So what I've been trying to promote and do is in higher education at the university, do we value the number of citations or the number of publications a researcher puts out, or do we value the impact to the community that their research might have? And some of those traditional metrics may not necessarily capture true excellence or impact. And so looking for alternatives is really important as we try to refocus, reshift things and in the competitive research enterprise that we see today.
So how you collect the data on something like that? Clearly you want to measure what your faculty, your researchers, your students, your staff are doing in these areas that are in many ways, as you said, hard to measure. They're subjective. An impact on quality of life or level of happiness of a community. How do you ask the individuals to provide the information? Do you do surveys, self-assessments?
Yeah, I think there's a movement to try to get to some of that data by surveying participants. Currently, the way we do it is ask the investigators to provide us with impact statements, kind of along the lines of the movement for narrative CVs. So instead of telling us that you have $1 million worth of research grants, tell us a little bit more about that research in a narrative way to tell us what that impact might be. And so asking the investigator for that impact is maybe the first step. To get better quality data, absolutely. Going to the participants to find out those stories is the way to do it. But that costs money. It's hard to do. And so I think it's a early evolving field within research assessment to start getting more quality impact data that is hard to collect.
Is it easier these days? Is the technology helpful to you in doing this these days versus when you started?
Yeah, technology can definitely help, especially in this new age of post-COVID, where things are largely virtual, or having access to virtual technologies can help, or the innovation of apps on our phones, right, to collect data. So technology definitely can help. Some of the problems are with some of the global databases that exist. Some of this data doesn't exist. For instance, arts and humanities or social behavioral research often isn't indexed or in traditional bibliometric databases and things like that. So we can't really get at how many people are actually using the materials. And so we need to start thinking of better ways or different ways of collecting some of that data.
That is definitely true. I cannot begin to count the number of thousands of cases of promotional tenures I've seen. And each one is different, right? So one of the ways we do it is not only using the numbers of publications and citations or so on, but using the references. What do a colleague or a peer say about you? Do you use that type of technique?
In the work that I do, I'm not really involved in promotion and tenure processes, but I think the techniques that we use when we're thinking about assessing an individual or a department is to definitely go beyond traditional quantitative measures and look at some of that qualitative information. So the Academy for Promotion and Tenure has largely relied on publications, citations, maybe dollars of grants. But what about patents? If someone didn't really publish any papers, but they did patent technology or they made a startup company, those are just as valuable, if not maybe more valuable within our economy than a publication and a citation. And so making sure that our evaluation processes are including discipline-specific outputs is really important. I think in some fields and disciplines, one comes to mind is nursing. They traditionally publish conference papers or present at conferences, but not peer-reviewed journals. And so making sure that our systems are set up to really capture what that discipline values is really important versus a standard set of metrics that are just historic, traditional, and easy to get to because they're in global databases.
So how do you navigate or reconcile your thoughts, which I agree with the concept of rankings? A lot of it is based on very traditional metrics, single numbers, obtained one way or another. How do you reconcile it? Because it is a fact that institutions across the board are, some at least, obsessed with the rankings.
Yeah. So I am not a fan of rankings. I think rankings have flawed methodology. They lack transparency. But you're right. They do rely oftentimes on both these traditional metrics that are largely quantitative, but they also rely sometimes on qualitative reputational metrics that are also biased based on who is providing that input. I think a couple of the ranking agencies actually use ratemyprofessor.com for some of their data, and that is students complaining or being positive about their faculty, right? And so is that quality data? Is that collected in the same rigor we would collect for our academic research? Probably not. And so so I'm not a fan of the rankings. I think rankings can help tell a story, but there's two institutions that really focus on rankings, I think often fail, versus doing the work that their mission sets them out to do. If they complete their mission and values, hopefully they're going to increase in their rankings because they're doing what they're supposed to do. But when you focus solely on becoming a top 20, that's where you start making some decisions that might incentivize gaming or only support one area of research at the detriment of other disciplines, other opportunities that students might not be able to participate in because you're focusing on one area. So I think what I would hope to see is that institutions start talking less about rankings and more about how their campus is comprehensive and does more than their rankings. It could be more as in focusing on the community engaged research that they do. And that's even for those institutions that rank really high. So oftentimes the institutions that are in the top are there because of their hardcore STEM or biomedical research that makes a lot of money, but they do a lot more on that campus than what's included in the rankings, and they need to celebrate that as well.
Those are very, very good points. Actually, the first issue of the Non-Alone newsletter some 4 years ago was by Chris Eisbruger, who is the president of Princeton. And in there, he argued very convincingly, and I think very sincerely, that he wasn't a fan of rankings either, although they're ranked number one most of the time in undergraduates, and he acknowledges that. But his point was, I need the metrics, but not to rank relative to others, but to tell me what can I improve.
That's right. And that's what I have actually said to certain data collections within the United States. So within the research enterprise, we have the National Science Foundation collects R&D expenditures through a national survey every year. And when they put out those data, they rank the institutions, they put them in order. And I've advised them or suggested to them, give us the data because we do need the data to see who's around our dollar amounts or our research expenditures and see what they're doing so that we can implore best practices or promising practices to continue to grow. But don't put them in rank order. Just put them in alphabetical order or don't show them as ranks. People will still use them for rankings, but there would be less emphasis on making sure that you're looking at rankings versus just what the data are telling us, right?
Shouldn't it be, and again, Chris argued that as well as other people, shouldn't the metrics be a function of the mission of the institution?
I think so.
Yeah. Every institution has a different mission, supposedly.
Yeah. So it really, so from my perspective and some of the work that I've been participating in internationally would be, let's start with what we value. And so an institution, when we're thinking about assessing anything within the academy, in this case, research, we should employ a process that starts with what we value, looking at the mission, looking at the vision. Each public land-grant institution or private institution has a very different mission and goal. And when we start with what we value, we then start looking at the context in which we sit. So an institution geographically sits in different places, so there's different context considerations. There's different political considerations too. And so once you look at what you value in those contexts, then you can start really getting some options that go beyond traditional metrics, traditional rankings, and things like that. And you start measuring what the institution really is meant to be. I worked for a president once where we were pushing the idea of joining, trying to join an elite group of institutions. And the first thing he asked was, well, what would that do for us? How would that help our state, our citizens, and the people we serve? And there are valid reasons to be a part of some of those groups because of reputation. But in the end, it really didn't necessarily, provide that much benefit. And so let's focus on our mission instead. Let's not focus on what this external group wants us to do. Let's focus on the mission for creating cures and solving the problems of our citizens as a public land grant institution, and not really worry about that other group and what they want us to be doing.
I think that's very wise. But I always wonder, I would like to hear your opinion, why do leaders, for the most part, may say that but do not act that way?
Don't act that way. I think there's probably a lot of pressures that they have, many pressures that I may not see in the seat that I sit in, to donors, to politicians. So especially for a state-funded institution, they might be having conversations with their state legislature about funding, about certain appropriations, and those conversations might go towards, well, let's make sure that our institution is getting highly ranked, and then I'm going to give you in the next budget cycle. So those types of conversations probably exist. I think it takes a strong leader and a courageous leader to say, okay, yeah, but no, let's focus on the mission, and the mission is education, service, research for our community. That takes a bold leader to actually do that versus just saying it, but then going in a different direction.
That's true. There's a pernicious influence from the outside, right?
That's right.
To play the game.
That's right. Yeah. So lots of different pressures from the outside. And I think institutions need to stop trying to measure what the outside wants us to measure. There's the big system of economics that are driving some of these things, especially in the rankings. There's money to be made. And so I'll tell you one anecdote from another institution. A colleague of mine said that their institution was ranked 200th or something in the world, in a world rankings. But they looked at the data and they said, they made a mistake. We should be like number 6. So they went to the ranking agency and complained. And that ranking agency said, okay, you're right. You're going to be number 6 now. Well, that institution took the bold step and said, no, thank you, pull us out of the rankings. Your processes are so flawed that just because we complained, you're going to make us in the top. We don't want anything to do with it.
That's a good observation.
Yeah, and so I think that story really leads us to understand a little bit more about the volatility of the rankings, but also bold leadership to say, let's do what our mission is, and not worry about these rankings over here.
Well, Baron, thank you very much. I think you've touched on a very different topic during these conversations, and one that is very important indeed. It's all about data ultimately.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Not Alone, Leaders in Conversation. We hope this discussion today sparked new ideas and left you with plenty to think about as you continue to lead in your own institution. If you found this conversation interesting, insightful, or thought-provoking, please share this episode with your colleagues, peers, and friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform so you can stay up to date with our latest episodes.